Hey, welcome to the Peanut Gallery. Today we have one of my best friends, right? One of my best friends, one of the best guys you'll ever meet, Jeremy Best on. You've never heard any of these jokes before?
You are the worst. I regret coming already.
So we're excited. We're going to talk about youth culture today. So very, very excited to do that. Tell you a little bit about Jeremy. So we connected a couple years ago. We took a leadership course
More than
in
a couple
BC.
years ago, dude.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a long time. What has it been? 7? It's probably been 7, 8 years.
It was it was 2012 or 13, I think, that we were in that program, so it's been a minute. Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it, though.
No, it really doesn't.
Shoot. Anyways, Aero Leadership flew out to BC. That's where we connected and realized we were a couple of minutes apart. So Jeremy is awesome for a couple of reasons. One is you are a foster parent. You're a dad. Yeah. From what Angela says, you're a decent husband from what I hear. But then you're also a youth pastor at Faith St. Thomas.
Yep, been there a while.
You coach rugby and football at Parkside, if I am correct.
Go Stampeders.
Go Stampeders. They're no Eagles, but whatever.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So anyways, you've done a bunch of stuff, been around. How long have you been doing youth ministry?
19 years now.
19 years.
19 years now, yeah. Yeah, 19.
Shoot. So you've been doing it longer than most of the youth you're reaching.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've been at Faith for almost 13, so the students in our junior high ministry now, were born after I got there. And that's weird. Yeah.
So for people listening, because a lot of people don't know what a youth pastor does, because they don't even know what any pastor does. Give me a little bit of how you got into it and kind of what you do and what your role is.
Sure, yeah. The real quick version was that I thought I was going to be an architect and started in school for that.
Really? Where'd you go to school?
At Mohawk College. I did my first year there, loved it, and then went home that summer, took a job at my home church in Sarnia at Temple Baptist, running the kids camp. People started saying, hey, you got some gifts in ministry. I'm like, no, thanks. That's real funny, but no. And basically spent the summer having a fight with God and lost and went to Heritage, got a deal. That always works out well. Yeah. And said, I'll give you a year, then I'm going to go back and do my thing, and ended up falling in love with youth ministry within my first year at Heritage. Yeah. And that's the rest. The rest is history, man. I served at a church in Mississauga for a little bit, Hamilton for 5 years, and made my way to St. Thomas in 2008.
Awesome. Oh, very cool. Very excited to have you on here.
Yeah, man.
So we're at different points in youth ministry, because I used to do youth ministry. So I did that for a good 10 years or so.
You sold out.
I did sell out, but
Hey Albert, do you want to hear a fun fact?
I do want to hear a fun fact.
So when you were youth pastor here, when you were doing the whole thing all together, and Jeremy over at Faith, I was like, you know what? I kind of enjoyed being at Faith more than I enjoy being here at Mount San.
Your own staff guy dipped on you to come to my youth group.
Wow.
How's that make you feel?
I don't know. So we have a hiring announcement for the church. We're looking to replace Trevor.
Maybe it was
whatever, Trevor. Whatever.
At some point, I was like, I want to go to Faith.
Whatever.
Here I am. You wanted the
There's just a girl there you're into, probably. That's why all the guys show up.
Was there?
You don't.
Not when I started.
We're checking Trevor for facial expressions,
know,
for
right?
clues.
He's kind of like, this wasn't supposed to go this direction. All right. So I'm now a parent of a youth, is what I was going to get at.
Weirdness.
So when you do youth ministry, you kind of feel like you kind of know what you're doing. Like I felt
Sometimes,
like,
yeah.
Well, I felt like I know these youth. They like me. Like we're good. And then you'd hear about other parents struggling with their youth, and you're like, I'll never be that.
Yep.
Right? I'll never be that, because I already know, because I do. And now that I've parented some youth, you realize it is hard. It is a whole. It's such a different world. And I've had a few moments in the last couple of years where I'm like, man, I never thought I would struggle with this. And so I think that this whole idea of helping with youth and parenting through it's a challenge. Now you're a couple years away still. I think your oldest is...
My oldest will be in our junior high group in 2 years. So I am getting ready to eat many of the words I've spoken to parents over the... Yeah. I'm already well aware of them. Like, I know very little about this whole parenting thing. Yeah.
So what we're going to talk about today, because there's so many parts of that, of youth culture we can talk about. We want to talk about social media specifically for a couple of reasons. One is, it is a huge thing right now.
Right.
The world we're living in right now is more online than it's ever been. So this is something that parents are really struggling with. We certainly are. How do you navigate that?
Sure.
It's... So I don't know if you remember your first phone.
I do.
We didn't get a phone until we were married.
Same.
Yes, right. See, that made sense, right? So we were driving out. We drove out for our honeymoon, and so I figured a phone, and so we borrowed one from my in-laws. That was the first time we had a phone.
There you go.
And then I remember getting my first iPhone. Went to St. Thomas because a buddy of mine had gotten it. It was the latest thing. And I remember picking it up and getting it and going, I don't know why I would want this. Like, it had access to Facebook and some other things. I'm like, I don't know why in the world I would ever want to just randomly look at my face. Like, who does this?
Yeah.
And so now fast forward, like, it's unreal how far that's come. What's your experience with that? When did you start? Or do you remember that?
Like, when I got my first job in Mississauga, I was commuting from, like, I was living part-time in Sarnia, part-time in Cambridge, and working in Mississauga. So my mom bought me a cell phone. It was like a little, like, Nokia, like brick cell phone. And, like, but it was just for emergencies in the car. So it sat in the car, turned off 99% of the time.
Yep.
And then when Angela and I got married, we shared a cell phone for probably 2 years. Like a little, like, Nokia flip phone kind of thing, right? Had, like, one little game on, like little, like, kind of, like, snake thing that ate the stuff. And like that was it. And like we're like, we basically used it to find each other. Like whatever was gonna be out or whatever, they'd take the phone. But then like when I moved here was when I got my first smartphone. Like the church gave us what was it? Palm Pilot. Oh man, it was a Palm Pilot.
Oh yeah.
Then upgraded to the BlackBerry a little after that, right? And I think I jumped into the iPhone game around like iPhone 5. But yeah, from like I was like definitely, I'm like, I don't want a cell phone. I want people to be able to find me.
Right.
To like now, like I compulsively check it. So like, things have changed.
Yeah. So no, very interesting. And going back to those brick phones, I remember they were awesome for multiple reasons. One was you could put them through the washer and dryer
and they
put them back together. You're golden.
It's fine. Yeah.
We were in Hamilton. I did that. I took it out of the dryer. I'm like, no way. So I put it back. Sure enough, no issues. You drop one of these phones in the puddle and you're out $1,000.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit because it has changed the world. I mean, it really has. It's not one of those things now where you can just tell your kids no. They're going to be involved. So much of the world involves being on social media. What are you seeing right now as a youth leader with the trends? Because I find it funny because I still think I'm trendy. I'm finding out I'm not, right? Like I'm finding out that apparently Facebook isn't what youth are using, and so a lot of this is adjusted. But what are kids using? And then maybe from there have a conversation a little bit about what parents need to know and go from there.
Sure, yeah. I think I'm older than you. I got even further detached than you are. like I'm still in youth ministry, but like I've never relied on being cool in youth ministry. I wasn't cool in high school, so like being outside of high school and cool, I didn't have a chance. But like what's trending in social media? Like the biggest trend is really that like it keeps changing. Like the moment you think you have what's current pegged, something else is going to pop up. I mean,
what is it? Maybe you don't have an answer, but I'm fascinated by the fact that they keep changing. So when I look at Instagram, and I don't have Snapchat or half those other things, but they all look like the same thing with a different name. What is it with that? Why the change constantly?
That's a great question. I mean, I think there's just room for market share. So I think there's room for like competitors to create, and like I think it's a relatively low cost like thing to create, and like people are just constantly on the hunt for the next new thing, and especially like when teens with social media are constantly on the hunt for the app that their parents aren't on. Right, so wherever as when Facebook started, it was a college thing, right, and it kind of merged down into high schools. But then like once mom and dad got on there, kids started moving away from it, and like Instagram became the next big thing, and then Snapchat, right, and like recently, like in the last couple of years, TikTok blew up, and like now it's like Clubhouse is the next one that's kind of blowing up in the last little bit.
I've never even heard of Clubhouse.
I haven't even heard of Clubhouse.
So like. So I don't see that stopping. I think you're going to continue to see that evolution, and you're going to see like Facebook still has a pretty big corner of the market, and like they're likely to exist in some form for a long time. And they own Instagram as well, so like those are like hub apps that are. But you're going to see other iterations of them continue to evolve, and kids and users just migrating between whichever one happens to look coolest or have a new little feature. But you're right; they basically all boil down to posting a picture or video or text, right, and sharing that. There's not a whole lot of variation there.
Yeah. So, as a parent, one of the big things that we were always told was you got to stay current with what your kids are on. But I'm finding
Yeah.
So then how do you navigate that then? How do you navigate the fact that you can't actually keep up with them? What are you seeing from parents or from youth ministry that parents are doing to work to navigate that? Because I find it as a parent really challenging because the dangers online are significant. And we don't want to downplay any of that. I mean, there's the extreme ones, there's the trafficking and a lot of that kind of stuff, but then sexting is a huge thing, which blew my mind. Blew my mind.
Bigger than what anybody actually talks about.
Right.
If you can get students to talk honestly to you, the number of like your students who have sent and or received nudes in some form, solicited or not, is massive. It happens all the time.
You just opened like a whole new.
We could talk on that for a while.
Well, let's actually do that then.
Yeah.
Let's stop here for a little bit because this is one of our biggest fears. I think fears of every parent. Because when you send something, you don't get that back. Like you don't get to say, I want to delete that and now it's gone.
Yeah, and I mean that was one of the big draws to like an app like Snapchat when it first launched. Was it built itself on this whole idea of like your story is there for 24 hours and like the message you sent to your friend disappears once they viewed it.
Right.
It doesn't disappear. It might disappear from their phone. It exists on an internet server somewhere forever. And if you read the fine print of like the I accept thing that you check without reading it,
that no one ever reads.
That no one ever reads because it's ridiculously long on purpose, is that the app owns those images and can use them, sell them, redistribute them how they see fit. So any image that anyone has ever posted on there is the property of that app. And should they choose to, sell them all on a website, should they choose to use them to market whatever, they have that right. Now, they may not do that because it might not be good for business.
Sure.
But they have that, like that is a possibility.
And the fact that it's your kids are on there.
Yeah.
Like, that's terrifying. As a parent, that's terrifying. I remember, so when I started youth ministry, so I'm trying to think of how old these guys would be, because I think they'd be late 20s now, the guys I was working with. I was dumbfounded that they were talking about sexting. Back then already, they were talking about it, and I was like, because to me at least, when I was going through my youth years, Jeremy, I was not confident enough to be sending anyone I didn't even want anyone to see me.
Tell me more about that, Albert. Tell me more about your confidence.
I remember so hockey change rooms, I don't know if you played hockey, but hockey change rooms, it gets weird when you get in your teenage years, right?
There's
naked
hockey,
boys walking all over the place. And it's just, as a teenage boy, so growing up, I mean, obviously that wasn't normal back then because we didn't have that technology, which tells you how old I am at this point. But then to now try to wrap your head, and I think this is where a lot of parents kind of struggle, kind of going like, during when we were in youth, I mean, there was the same temptations to sleep around or to whatever, like that, all that sexual stuff. But this idea, if you would walk around and show yourself naked, that was considered a crime.
Yeah,
like
well,
you weren't allowed to do that. But this is now online become very commonplace and very unsolicited. And what at least blew me away from my own kids' experiences, the places they're getting it. So I thought we were doing a good job kind of keeping on top of, some of the tags and kind of what was going on with social media. Then to find out it's actually through the games that most of this is happening. So there's these games that look completely innocent, but then as soon as you go to the chat, all of a sudden you're like, what in the world?
Yeah, like games like a lot of like parents like of younger kids and like your kids are probably playing games like Roblox or Minecraft and all those kind of things. And like you think like, they're just harmless online games. They are like they're social media.
Yeah.
Right. They have that whole component of it. Now there's settings and there's parental controls on most of these games that you can lock down. And if you haven't investigated the parental controls on the apps your kids use, do it. Like go and do that now because there's settings you can control. You should have the passwords. So you can do a fair bit of work to protect your kids in those things. But there are always risks. Yeah.
What is it about that is it just the fact there's that youth formative years, or what do you kind of as a youth leader? I mean, you've walked through this with so many kids already. What is it that draws them to that, and how can you kind of protect your kids from that?
Like draws them towards like a sexting kind of thing. Yeah. Well, like from a developmental standpoint, we know that like students have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, and so like they're basically hardwired for risk taking. That's part of the adolescent experience. Right? Until they hit about 25, and that all kind of firms up, they're just hardwired to take risks, right? And we know that like there's also there's a risk reward thing. So when they send something out like that, and like whether it's sexting, whether it's even just posting on social media, like we all know the feeling right where you open up the app, right, and you see notifications, especially after you've posted something. You're like, oh, hey, I posted a cute picture of myself last night, and you open the app like a few hours later the next morning, and like there's a bunch of notifications. You get a little excited, right? It's dopamine,
100%,
right? And there's a dopamine release, so it's rewards. Like that felt really good last time, so I'm going to post again, and like so maybe it's a teen girl or teen guy posts a risky picture, and it gets a bunch of likes. Well, maybe if I post another one or a riskier one, it gets a bunch of so like it's just that feedback response that they're pursuing, and they're not as like again part of that developmental piece is that they don't foresee consequences the same way, right? So like I've joked a lot of times like I owe most of my best stories to a complete and total lack of foresight, right? Is that like if I had known like what could have happened, I wouldn't have done it, but because I was 18, 19, 20, I'm like I'm invincible, right? So that plays into it as well.
Anything, and I know I'm asking you a very difficult question that nobody really has an answer to because there's no parent out there listening going, I'm okay with this. You know they're going to experiment. You know they're going to do some of that kind of stuff. But the dangers of this, knowing that trafficking happens around here, knowing what they do with child porn, knowing all this kind of stuff, what advice would you give to parents on how to navigate that conversation? Because I think the conversation, you can't control your kids when they're teenagers. That's not in the cards. And you can't – parental controls matter as much as the kid is willing and wanting those controls.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff I can answer. Number one, you should have some type of software on your devices that's allowing you control. Things like Disney Circle, things like Covenant Eyes. I mean, or even like if you're computer savvy enough, you can do most of the stuff through your basic router.
Well, from what I understand, and I haven't looked into this very much, but Eastlink, which is all we have out here, you can get a setting from them already where they begin to block stuff even before it comes into the house.
Absolutely. So like in most cases, like your internet router, your internet service can do a lot of that for you. If you're less savvy, you're like, I don't know how to work all that, then there are services you can pay for, devices you can buy. Disney Circle, like I've heard from many parents, is the best one, kind of the most universal, easiest to set up. There's a cost to all these things, of course, but you can do those things. Make sure you are monitoring and change the password. One advice I give to parents is that like the passwords you don't think your kids have, they have. And they are getting around them. So, like, if you're not updating your passwords frequently, you should. If you haven't changed your password lately, change it because I know that your kids know how to get around it.
Okay, so you don't need to look at them. Just tell me. I'll go change my passwords, all right?
Yeah, so that's definitely a part of it. Like, think carefully as to when you give your kids access to a phone and social media. What's the right age? I don't know. My oldest is 10. So we're a little ahead of that yet. When will we give them a phone? Certainly not before high school, but for us. Different parents make different decisions for their own reasons. That's fine. But whenever you enter that realm, you have to be ready to have before they get that in their hands, have the full conversation about sex, have the full conversation about pornography, have the full conversation about how you're going to respond when a guy sends you his penis in a photo. Like, what does that mean? How do we deal with it? How do we interpret that? Because that's going to happen. And so if you're not willing to have that conversation, you shouldn't be willing to put the device in their hand. Like back when we were kids, before the internet was a thing, like you wouldn't, like a dad, like hopefully a parent wouldn't have locked their kid in a room full of porno magazines and said, hey, be good, don't look at them. You're like, that's really dumb. Well, don't hand your kid a cell phone without being willing to have these conversations about what the realities are.
But I think that's part of the challenge is, I feel for the kids. Because for us, I remember being in those teenage years, you'd walk into the stores and you see the magazines up top and you're tempted to look. But it's one thing to have to take that magazine, try to fake your ID and buy it versus literally just being able to search whatever you want and go. And I think that's part of, I think, why these conversations, to me at least, matter because a lot of this is done in secret.
Absolutely, and 100%. Like the difference you mentioned there from like when we were kids, that like it's been said, I can't remember who said it, but like, the previous generation, like pornography, you had to go and seek it out.
Right.
So you had to find like the parent's stash. You had to get the guts to go into the variety store or whatever, right? But now it seeks you out. Yeah. So it's not like kids necessarily going and searching it. It's like it's hardwired to go and find them. Yeah,
you're hearing more and more of those stories where kids are like, I wasn't searching, it just showed up.
Yeah, it pops up.
But then curiosity, you're curious. Of course you're going to be curious, and I think that's. So I think there's risks we need to, and so I don't want to say, and I'm assuming we're not coming across like social media is not terrible. The internet's not terrible. We don't
like the technology, like a lot of other things in life. It's neither good nor bad, but it has its consequences, right? So it's like a lot of other things in life. Like it can be used for good, it can be used for evil. Let's choose to use it wisely, right?
So when I was talking with Josie a few weeks ago, we were kind of reminiscing a little bit about our youth years, and in our youth years, so my youth life was very, very social. We hung out all the time. We went out all the time. Like the idea of spending any time at home with my parents on a weekend was like, no, unless I have to be there. And it would be Sunday lunch. We had roast. It was wonderful and fantastic. But beyond that, you don't want to be home. What I'm seeing now with a lot of the youth, both in our church and in our community, and I'm hearing from a lot of the parents, is that they have lost that desire to be social.
Yep.
And so I was reading this morning an article that stood out to me from the Globe and Mail talking about the problem of urban loneliness. Which, when you just think about it, if you just stop for just a second, urban loneliness, you are surrounded by people. Yep. But I think this is one of the unforeseen consequences. I don't think anybody who ever developed phones, I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that if Steve Jobs would have in any way been able to foresee that this is what would have come from cell phones.
For sure, yeah.
But we have this epidemic of loneliness in a culture connected to everyone in every place. Like, so now, I don't know, is that your experience with youth that you're
100%.
working with?
Yeah, like if we compare like what we used to do, like I had the same experience in growing up and coming through high school and youth group and all kind of stuff. And like it wasn't unusual for us on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, like be hanging out with 20, 30, 40 people, right? And
100%.
Whatever one of our parents' homes were suckers enough to like let everybody hang out there that night, right? But we were always with our friends. And like it's not the students, they aren't doing that. They still are, of course. But there's also like it's not that they're less social, it's that they're social online.
Right.
So they're less inclined to have to actually go out and do social interaction in person.
Right.
Some of them just have anxiety about it.
Yeah.
Like, because like the thing with online interaction, the thing with social media is that it allows you to be extremely selective about what you put out there. Right. So it might, the stories, features, all these kind of things, they might look like they're designed for us to kind of reveal our whole lives and be transparent. But no, it's highly curated, highly edited versions of ourselves. And by going out in public and being around people, especially people you're not like really comfortable with, like you put that image and stuff at risk, well, maybe it's not worth it. Right. Where you can stay at home and play your games or be on social media and talk to people and interact the way you want and have that control feature of it.
Right. Yeah, because we every Sunday, we even had a specific location here in Mount Salem. We went to Clausen's house, and that's where we'd play hockey, and we'd damage the door, and you're trying to flirt with the girls, and all like. But that, so to me, that's one of the things that I'm struggling with a little bit as a parent, and watching a lot of these youth go through this. Go like, you're not connecting, and it's in a lot of those connections that you're building a lot of the skills you're going to need for the real world. Because when you're at work, you're face to face. You're face to face with a boss, and you're not going to be able to avoid these conflicts and just unfriend somebody and block somebody. So I feel like since you're not a parent of a youth yet, you probably have better advice than most of us who are youth.
Need more naive advice?
Right. But you know what, though? I think sometimes you get cynical as that. As a parent, you kind of go, frick, I don't know. But I'd be curious, kind of as you're navigating, you say your oldest is 2 years away. What are some of the things that you're trying to implement to help your kids navigate through this positively?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm being terribly strategic about this.
Just pretend for a second.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is me being super wise. But here's the things I think are important. Encourage actual face-to-face social interaction any way you can. And find what works for your kid, whether it's like, let them pour themselves into a sport, youth group, something like things that put them in front of new people, and do that regularly.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Encourage them to go outside. Like one of the best things our kids do, and again, it's not because we're super strategic, it's because we're lucky to live in a neighborhood where the 4 houses beside us all have kids around our kids' age. They just go outside and play. Let them be creative. Don't give them something to do. Just let them go and figure it out. Let them make up games and all these kind of things. And like that's where that's key developmental stuff, right? If you talk to like developmental psychologists, stuff like that, like those like that kind of play and creativity and all kind of stuff, and solving their problems. And when one kid starts crying, let them manage it and work it out. Like that kind of stuff's important. But so find a place where they can interact. And like don't like, especially when you get to teen years, it just gets more complicated. And that's. And again, part of that's by design. Like part of the feature of like as students move through those high school years, that like they should be pulling away from you.
Right.
They should be individuating and kind of figuring out who they are of themselves. So you got to give them space to do that, and so that you're not going to be able to control everything that they do, at least not successfully. It's not going to go well for either side. But you're still a parent. You still have to exert influence. I remember a mentor of mine when I was a kid telling me, he's like, by the time my kids turn 16, he's like, my job as a parent should be mostly done, and I should turn it into a guide. Yeah. That might be a bit of an idealized scenario, right? Depending on your child and all and a litany of other influences and things like that going on. But I think the concept is true. That like hopefully you've done the work in those years leading up to that point. By the time they hit 16, you can kind of shift into that role of, hey, it's your turn to start making some decisions. Let us kind of coach you along. There's some good advice there. But I don't think there's one magic bullet. You can't say, hey, do this and it'll fix everything. But like encourage your kids to find encourage them to find healthy social interactions. And as you need to, push them into some of those places.
Yeah, I know for us, and every kid is different. For us, it's been sports. And our kids all love sports. But there are a lot of those lessons you just can't learn online.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
You can't enter a cheat code into a baseball tournament where you just got your butt kicked. Right, and I think some of those
dealing
lessons,
with failure and hurt and navigating teammates and friends, it's all complicated. Yeah,
100%. And even just learning how to interact with coaches. and umpires.
Yeah,
I mean,
authority.
anger, right? 100%. So there's a bunch of that kind of stuff.
I'm a sports guy, so you're speaking my world, but that's not going to speak to every kid. But there's other places to find that, right? Whether it's
Art.
Art, fantastic, part-time job, like theater, dances, all kinds of places.
Yep.
That's it's a whole other thing we could go into, but like how busy society has gotten, especially for kids. That's a different conversation.
It is.
But picking your spot for your kid to be in, like they don't have to be in everything, but pick one thing, maybe it's two things that they go into and they can pour themselves into.
No, and that's one thing that we have tried to do. But I think one of the neat things about COVID, and we are running out of time, but has been the fact that everything's paused.
Yeah.
And so now it's this chance to kind of go, okay, were the things I was doing before the things I want to be doing?
Hit the reset button and decide what's really
but
what's
not the
worth
great
coming back
reset.
to.
We're not going down that road. Not the great reset, Jeremy.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said reset.
No, you shouldn't. Wrong words. No, it really has. It has given us, and I hope, it's one of the things that we as a family have done. Like we did this last night, and one of my highlights has been that Josie has started reading books to the boys.
Nice.
And so we're reading through the Ranger's Apprentice, right? And it's this kid is becoming a ranger, war, blah, blah, blah. I love it. I'm just fascinated. So last night we took the van. We wanted a Starbucks, so Josie read. The kids are all fascinated. We go grab a coffee, come home.
Cool.
But those are kind of things that beforehand we didn't have time for. And there's lots of things. Our kids were different ages. That works now. But I think this has given us a chance that I really hope parents don't take for granted.
For sure.
And I really hope kids don't take for granted because you live in a place where you can do anything. You name the sport, you name the activity, it's here and you can do it. But I think we miss out on a lot of that because you never actually stop and go, is this actually what I want to do? Is this really what I want to pursue? The other thing, I guess the final thing would be kids are going to follow what we do.
And I was just going to say that's the biggest point is that they will model your behavior. So if you're sitting at home in your living room every Friday night, just doom scrolling on your phone, your kids are going to assume that that's life.
Right.
But if you're in the habit of being social and going out and meeting with people and taking them and sometimes dragging them along with you, they're going to emulate that same behavior. Right? No matter what your kids tell you, no matter how your interaction with them feels, even when they're 17, 18, 19 years old, study after study after study of teenagers responding to the study. So what teens say is that their parents are far and away the biggest influence in their life. That's what teenagers are saying themselves. So you exert far more influence on your kids than what they're going to let you realize. They're going to fight you on it. That's how it goes. But they're watching, they're listening, they're learning, and they care how you respond and what you do and how you live your life. In terms of their choices of faith and how they live their life and how they choose a partner in life, all those things, the vast majority, the biggest influence is parents every single time.
Well, and anybody who's over the age of 25 knows this because it's right around then that you realize how much of an influence.
My parents weren't stupid.
And do you know who I'm like? My parents.
So, that's a terrifying realization.
It really is. It really is. But anyways, we are running out of time, and we got to do this again. And there's so much more we can dive into this, but appreciate the insights. I really appreciate the work you're doing. I love the fact that you're fostering. That's nice.
It's been a journey.
Not everybody can do it because there just are not that many kids, but those who do it, if you guys know Jeremy and Angela, be supporting them the best way you can because it is a journey. But yeah, we'll talk about that one day. With that, thanks for your time.
Great to hang out, Albert.
Take care. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.